Hi, welcome to the online cooking demonstration coming to you live from Seattle, Le Cordon Bleu. My name is Jennifer Sahoni. I'm the Director of Education here at the school. And this is Chef Jeff Eitmeyer, who's my lead chef instructor here. And today we're going to be cooking various forms of carpaccio. Carpaccio is a really nice, lovely, airy, bright, refreshing item to have in the summer. We're coming into that. So I'm going to be working with beef carpaccio. And I'm also going to be doing a little vegetarian version, so I'm going to talk about some zucchini carpaccio and how you can work with that. And Jeff, tell them about what you're going to work with.
I'm going to be putting together a couple variations on that same theme. The first one that I've already gotten started here is a poached pear that I'm going to put on a tuile. It's going to have a little mascarpone cheese. I'll take you through some of the ingredients here that's in that in a second. I'm also going to be fabricating a ahi tuna loin, so that you can see how that comes together. And then I'm going to take that and turn it into a tuna tartare that's going to go on some wontons that I have over there ready. And so it's going to show you a couple variations, dessert version and then a savory version. All of the things that we're doing here today are a variation on one theme, like Chef mentioned, a carpaccio, something crisp on the bottom, fabricated items on top. So bear that in mind, that there's this continuous theme with everything that we're doing. We're also going to demonstrate some of the basic techniques that you're going to see from your first days here in culinary school. And we're going to take you through those and be able to point those out to you as we go through. So let me take you through at the beginning here these pears that I have poaching. Here's the ingredients that I have in the poaching liquid right now. I've got some quite a few different spices in there. I've got some juniper berries. I've got whole cloves. I've got whole nutmeg that I've shaved in there. Cinnamon sticks. I've got citrus in the form of both lemon and orange. Also the orange juice and lemon juice have been squeezed in there. I've got fresh mint. This is star anise. Brown sugar to sweeten it just a touch. I'm working with Bosc pears today, but this type of poach can be made with any type of fruit, from apples to different types of pears, whatever's fresh at the moment. Could you also use
different types of citrus or different types of spices and herbs?
Absolutely. As you can see, what I'm doing is I'm taking right here our poaching liquid, which is port wine, and I'm just loading it up with a bunch of good flavors to give a complex, layered, final flavor to this really fresh and nice pear. You could also use things like champagne instead of port wine. So the variations on this theme are endless. You can use lots of different types of fresh herbs, lots of different types of spices, and take this idea in any direction that you'd like to go. Now I've got the pears in here poaching away. Now this is under a parchment paper lid so that the exposed parts of the pear do not dry out when they come into contact with the air, and they've been simmering there for a while. The cook time on a dish like this is about an hour of very low temperature simmering, and to let the flavors all come together and penetrate into the pear.
Now, one of the things we like to think about and teach when with our students at Le Cordon Bleu is really we want to focus in and hone in on technique. Because once you understand what the technique is, you can really start to play with the various spices or the ingredients, or instead of pear, it could be apple, just like Chef was saying. So we want to keep that in mind as we show you some of the recipes that we have today. And certainly we can talk about different ingredients that you could use as well. For me, I've got this beef tenderloin here. This is a whole tenderloin. This is a subprimal cut that we have. This is one of the things that we look at throughout the program here at Le Cordon Bleu. And I want to break it down. This is later, you might come to know it as a filet mignon or a Chateaubriand cut. And so I'm going to start and work through here. I've got several things that I want to look at. So I've got, if you can see right here, I've got a separation here that's a natural seam separation. And that's really easy. I really don't need much of a knife. I can kind of tear through it just like this. And I'll keep running my fingers through. Because as close as I can keep this to the natural separations, the better off I'm going to be and the better it's going to look. I have another separation right over here. This piece, this is going to be your Chateaubriand piece right here. Same thing, I can just start working through that with my hands. Now as it starts to get down in here, I do need to start using my knife. So I'm going to take a small knife and just use the tip, just like that. Because if I start using the whole blade, Then I start cutting into the protein, which I really don't want to do. This allows me to keep more of my precision there and work with the meat as best I can. Now, a piece of protein like this that you're fabricating from a more whole state, you are going to have quite a bit of trim to use. And there are different things that you can put this trim towards, and we like to talk about that in all of our classes as well, because the yield is very important, and part of where we earn our money as chefs is going to be right here. So while I can't use this piece right here for carpaccio, I could probably use it for stroganoff, or maybe I could use it for sausage, or I could use it into making burgers. There are lots of beautiful things that I could do with this. This is called the chain. And you see it kind of looks like a little bit of a chain. It's got a lot of fat to it. So if you were going to use it beyond this state, you might want to consider trimming it down. It's really going to depend on what you're planning to use it for. So I'm going to put this right to the side right over here. That's all usable trim. I'm going to look at this part of it and do the same thing. So you'll see that we tend to move the protein around the cutting board so that we can keep ourselves safe. We can see what we're doing, because it doesn't make sense for me to start working like this. I can't see what's going on. And then Jeff will yell at me, and that won't be very happy.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to keep cutting my knife through there and just separate this piece out. People pay a lot of money for this piece right here, so you definitely want to keep it nice and pretty. So I'm going to keep that right over here for now. And now I'm going to start cleaning off the main part of this loin. And this is where you're going to get your filet mignon. Right here, you can see, I'm going to put my fingers underneath there. But all of that is just fat that you can literally rip off. And you don't need to use a knife for that. So I'm going to take all of that off. You can use this. You can render the fat off of this. It really at some point just depends on how much time and labor you have and you're willing to spend for that. And then I have this right here. And this is called the silver skin. The problem with silver skin, it looks kind of nice, but it's really, really tough and chewy. So you do want to make sure you take that off. This is a lean piece of meat. I'm not going to have the time to cook it and low and slow temperatures with a little bit of moisture. I might be able to do something like that with a different type of cut. But here in this case, I want to make sure I take it off, because otherwise I'm just going to end up with a really chewy piece of meat. No good, right?
No good at all.
So I'm going to take my knife and just get right below the edge and angle it up and keep working it that way.
So I got to ask you, Chef, why did you choose that particular knife to use, as opposed to, say, a full-size chef's knife or a butcher knife?
It's a really good question. So I like this little knife because it gives me more control. And there are a couple of things I'll always say about knives. You know, you want to think about safety first. You want to think about what you're comfortable working with. And you want to think about what's appropriate for the technique. So a lot of chefs you'll see will use a boning knife or a fillet knife, something else like that, maybe a utility knife. I am very, very comfortable using my paring knife. I prefer it. It's just a matter of my safety. And so I'm going to use this knife. It is not the traditional knife that you would use for this application.
So I guess you're saying whatever knife gives you the best results and you
Absolutely.
feel most comfortable with is the appropriate knife for the task?
Absolutely. You know, I don't want to use the big blade because this is a little bit more precision work. So if I were to use something like this, it's just too big for me to work with.
Sure.
If I use my chef's knife, which is like something that he has right over here, is again too big for me to work with. For me, smaller works. Probably the biggest knife you want to go with is going to be your fillet knife. So I'm going to continue working through this. Jeff, do you want to start talking about the tuna?
Absolutely. I've got something very similar to what Chef is doing going on over here. This is a tuna loin, part of a tuna loin from an ahi tuna. You can tell it's ahi by the color of the flesh. It has this beautiful rose, purplish tint to it. And it's great for what I'll be making, the tuna tartare, which is a raw preparation of tuna. Somewhat akin to sushi, but not Japanese in that sense. Now, the thing with tuna is I'm using gloves not only because it's nice to keep your hands clean, but this is ready to eat food. Chef is doing the same thing with her beef in the sense that we're not going to cook this. We're going to give you 2 raw preparations of these proteins. One thing that when this tuna loin shows up, it has a couple of different things that need to be removed when you fabricate it. One is the skin that's on here, which for the tuna is really tough. Not good to be served on it. The other, as you can see right here, this really dark strip. This is called the bloodline, and that will need to be removed as well. Now, there's going to be much less yield loss or unusable trim coming off this fish than there was off the beef. But I think you'll see once I get into it, I'm going to be doing a lot of the same kind of work that Chef Sahoni was doing and still is with the beef.
Well, that's the nice thing about it, because once you start to learn the technique behind fabricating proteins, they all start to look the same. So if I know how to do this, then I can start to learn how to work my way around lamb or pork.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Same thing with fish. When we learned about fabricating fish, we can do the same thing. So if I know how to work my way around this, I'll learn my way around salmon or bass or snapper or whatever it might be that you're working with. Again, it's focusing on technique rather than focusing on the recipe or the particular ingredient that you're working with.
And not only that, on top of that, you'll see that the choices of protein that we use for these dishes, they're going to be raw preparation. So this has to be very, very tender protein, obviously, because we don't have the cooking that we would normally do, the grilling, the braising, the poaching, the whatever it is, to cook and soften that protein. So the types of meat and where it is on the animal that you bring it from is very, very important. The loin of the tuna. This is back towards the tail. This is some of the best meat on the entire fish. Likewise with the beef tenderloin. That is the most tender cut on the entire animal. And being aware of that as opposed to a different cut off of the animal that you would need to then cook in a totally different way. And that's one of the things that we focus on in several of our classes here is the identification of the different cuts off the animal so that you can know how to approach that piece of meat and cook it the best way to get the best results on the plate. Again, it's all about technique and knowledge.
So I have my tenderloin here. I've cleaned it up. This is some of my trim and some of my usable trim. What we can always do is save this for a later date and decide how we're going to use it. I would probably, with a raw piece of meat like that, you want to use this sooner rather than later. But you do want to make sure that you get the full benefit of it. So this is one that I took a little bit earlier. This is right from the center of my tenderloin, and this is probably the best part of the meat for this purpose. And what I did was I froze it for a period of time so it's a little bit more firm. And I'm going to make very thin slices out of it.
That's not frozen solid though, is it, Chef?
No, it's not frozen solid. It still has a little bit of give to it. I want to make sure of that. So, the good call is probably start freezing it maybe an hour ahead of time and work through it that way.
All right.
Chef, when fabricating fish, are flatfish processed the same way as you're doing this one?
No. Tuna is classified as what we call a round fish, like a salmon or a trout or something like that. Any of the fish that basically swim upright through the water, wherever it may be, salt water or fresh water, we classify those as round fish. You're going to break them down differently than you would say a halibut or sole or one of those types of fish. Those are referred to as flatfish. They lay on the bottom. They're the kind that have the eye that rotates over on top. There's a different type of technique for breaking down those fish than there is for a round fish. It's a really good question. Here's a good question, Chef. The proteins that we're working with, are they room temperature or are they out of the walk-in? Is that a big difference?
Well, these are out of the walk-in, and we always have to focus on food safety and sanitation, especially when serving the public. What I will say is, you do want to be conscientious of how that might affect the cooking of your protein. So, for example, something that's going to go on the grill pretty quickly, you want to make sure that it comes up to a little bit towards room temperature so you're not serving something that's cold in the middle. It does affect how you're cooking it.
Here's another thing to think about with that same question, is that when you're cooking something, when you're cooking a piece of protein, it's a fairly aggressive change of temperature from, say, 40 degrees, the walk-in temperature, up to 140 degrees, which is a commonly known med well or medium. That's a big temperature swing in a short amount of time. If you are able instead to kind of pre-warm that so the temperature change isn't as extreme, it's more gentle, you're going to get a juicier piece of meat coming off the grill out of the oven. You're going to get less moisture loss and shrinkage and things like that. So that's one of the things that we have in mind when we're trying to make that choice.
So when thinking about carpaccio really refers to most commonly raw beef. It doesn't mean that it's exclusive to that. Oftentimes you can have different types of fish carpaccio. That's why we thought about the tuna tartare. But very much in the same vein as ceviche, or in the same vein as sushi or sashimi, you can eat that raw fish and season it. So you can take a tuna loin, similar to how Chef is fabricating this one, or if you had a piece of salmon loin or something like that, go through a very similar process. Throw it into the freezer for a little while so that you can get those very nice thin slices out of it, and then go ahead and season it in a very similar fashion as what I'm going to do now, actually. So I have my beef here, it's sliced, and I'm going to start putting this dish together. Now, as part of this dish, I have a little bit of olive oil that I'm going to add to it because I want to season the beef. I want to give it a lot of flavor. I have some salt that I'm going to use, some pepper, and I have a variety of ingredients. So I kept this part of the dish fairly traditional. I'm going to scoot right under you, sorry, Chef. Absolutely. And I have some capers, I have some lemon, I have some parsley, and some Parmesan. So I'm going to take all of these ingredients, go ahead and mix them and toss them into a bowl. I'm going to leave those because this is pretty much just garnish. I'm going to take some of my lemon.
All right.
I've got some lemon juice that I'm squeezing in here. And then I'm going to take the other part of my lemon and I'm going to use some of the zest. And the zest is really, really beautiful, flavorful part of the lemon that you want to use. So I'm going to take this, use it on my microplane. I want to get as much of that zest in there as possible. That's gorgeous flavor that's going on right there. How's your loin, Chef?
Doing pretty good. I just want to let everybody see the finished product of the fabrication. You'll notice, first of all, the knife I chose is a larger slicing knife. This is better for this type of fabrication. The types of cuts that are done with fish are much more along the lines of smooth, straight, long slices as opposed to a small knife work like Chef was doing on the beef tenderloin. And what I've got here at the end is basically the center cut of the loin. The bloodline has been removed. You can see this is what we end up with here. Then I have some usable trim. Okay, part here that I removed was the fin attachment. Again, some tough, unusable stuff. This I could in turn use for something, roll it in, say, crushed peppercorns, sear it in a pan, slice it thin as a tuna carpaccio, and sell that on a completely different dish. I'm going to set that aside, but this is usable scrap. I additionally have this that I sliced off the end of the loin, because what I'm going to go for here with the tuna tartare is small diced tuna, and I'm going to show you how that's done and kind of demonstrate the kind of slice that you would use when fabricating fish, especially tuna. It's a fairly firm, dense fish, but it's going to be this slow slicing motion. You need a nice sharp knife for this cut. I'm going to cut a few of these off, and this is what I'm going to use to make my tuna tartare.
Chef, I went to a restaurant once and they had a smoked tuna tartare. How do you think they were able to do that?
There's a couple of different methods of smoking that would be applicable here, and that one would be what's referred to as cold smoking, where you're able to generate the smoke in a smoker like you would normally use for beef jerky or smoked salmon or anything like that. Pipe it then, that smoke, into a chilled area with this raw tuna in it, still very, very cold, but then the smoke infuses onto the raw tuna without cooking it, without heating it. That's called cold smoking, and it's a very fun way to add a whole nother layer of flavor to this tuna. All right, I'm going to clear this off my board really quickly.
While you do that, I'm going to move on to plating the carpaccio, the beef. So I'm using some crostini here. Really, I've got some baguette that I sliced on the bias fairly thin. I added some butter to it. I put it into a pan. I seasoned it with salt and pepper, and I'm going to use that as the base for my carpaccio. So again, something nice that you can use in the summer. If you wanted to use other types of crackers or breads, or if you wanted to put the crostini on the side and not use it at all as part of the plate up, you absolutely could. And I'm going to use some of my carpaccio just like this. It's well seasoned with my lemon and my parsley. I've got olive oil on here. I've got my capers on here. So I've got lots of flavorful things going on. And then what I'm going to do is also take a little bit of my Parmesan. And we have Parmesan Reggiano, which is the Parmesan that comes from a specific region in Italy. You can get other types of Parmesan, but I think that they're a little bit plasticky in some cases. And I probably wouldn't use shaved Parmesan, or sorry, grated Parmesan, because it'll melt too easily. And I'm just going to take this and shave it right on here.
All right, Chef, we have a question here. How healthy is it to eat meat raw versus cooked? Is there a major flavor difference, nutritional difference, or any other things like that we should be aware of?
Well, you want to make sure, for me it's always healthier to eat things as close to nature as possible. But you do want to make sure that you're very sanitary about it. You know, I'm still using oil here, so we still have that. I still have salt and pepper, we still have that. I can eliminate those if I want to. I wouldn't say that there's a huge difference between those two.
One thing to consider is with all these meats, any type of protein or anything else that you're considering serving raw as a chef, you need to pay very, very close attention to where that is sourced. Where are you getting it from specifically? When you are buying tuna, there are different grades. And what we're using here is referred to as sashimi grade tuna, or tuna that is the highest grade possible, ready to use as sashimi, in other words, to be cut up and used raw. And that is a much higher grade of tuna than you would get, say, if you were going to serve grilled ahi tuna, something like that. I want to point out really quickly, the cuts that I'm making here to the tuna, these are identical to the cuts that you will be making as a culinary student in your very first class here at Le Cordon Bleu. This is no different than the small dice you will be learning to make using a potato. And those skills transfer, those techniques are usable and will be used for the rest of your career. And that is why we teach them, that is why we focus so heavily on technique here. It's the exact same type of cutting motion that you are going to be learning with potatoes and vegetables. That is what you're going to use in all different aspects of the knife work for the rest of your career.
You know, with our knife work, one of the things that we talk to the students often about is, you know, at first it's going to be slow. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to the knife. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to the ingredients. It's going to take a little bit of time to be used to being here. But we're not looking for you to be really, really, really speedy at first. We want you to be precise. First things first, learn how to do it properly. And then the speed will come. And we talk about that quite a bit. We understand that when you come into a classroom for the first time, you come into the kitchen, it's not just cooking anymore. We want you to be precise, we want you to be clean, we want you to think about food safety sanitation, we want you to think about all these other things that are going on. And that's part of what we're here to teach you how to do as well.
Absolutely. In addition to that, not trying to overwhelm everyone, but A lot of the things that we teach at school, besides just how to cook, are soft skills, such as how to be a professional, how to work as a team, how to work side by side with someone for a bunch of hours and get work done together, regardless of who they are, where they come from, things like that. So we cover a lot of bases here at Le Cordon Bleu. Now I broke out the ingredients here that I have for this version of tartare, tuna tartare. I've got some finely minced shallots. I've got some finely minced garlic. I've got fine cut chives, fresh grated ginger, a little bit of lemon. And all I'm going to do very simply is you just add these ingredients in. This is another area where knife cuts are extremely important, because if you can see down here, here's the tuna that I've cut. If these shallots, if this garlic is cut too large, it's also served in a raw form. If they are cut too large, it's going to affect not only the way that the dish looks on the plate, it's going to affect how it eats. I mean, if you think about it, biting into a great big piece of raw garlic, not ideal.
It'll sit you back for the rest of the day?
Yes, yeah, that tends to ruin the evening in a very short amount of time. So the knife cuts for everything that is cut in the kitchen are extremely important to pay attention to. Whether they're larger cuts, smaller cuts, it doesn't matter. So that focus, that precision.
I think, too, the other piece that we focus on is uniformity. So we teach you about sizes, and we have all these words that go with these sizes, which is great. But the most important fact is to keep them uniform so that they cook evenly, or that they're, you get even pieces or even distribution throughout whatever the product is that you're making.
Absolutely. Now the last thing, I've got a little bit of acid in here in the form of fresh lemon.
Could you use
Meyer
something
lemon,
else?
Actually. Absolutely. You could use a flavored vinegar. You could use different things like that. Any type of acid would work. I'm using sesame oil as the fat for this. Sesame oil
going
is
for the Asian
really
flair,
powerful.
huh?
Yes, I do. It smells great. Sesame oil is pretty powerful, so you want to be cautious about how much you add. But the sesame oil and the lemon work to balance one another. The fat and the acid are going to work in harmony in this dish.
So I had a question from the live chat, which is, was the baguette toasted? And yes, it was. In this case, we did it in a pan, but you could do it toasted. You could do it on the grill. You could throw it into the broiler in the oven if that's the way that you wanted to do it.
Right.
And then any of the acidity that you're putting into any of these dishes are eventually going to start curing things. So it's important when you're working with carpaccio, when you're working with tuna tartare, that you don't do it too early. You don't want to mix everything together too early. So, if it's for service in about 5-10 minutes, that's something that would work out really well. If you're going to prep it now to eat it in a couple of hours, you might get something that's really, really chewy. You want to be careful and sensitive to that as well. So probably the best thing when you're talking about adding acid or prepping these dishes is to get everything prepped out, everything meased out, and then you can add and play around as you come to service, just like Chef is right now.
That's a really great point. And another one of the things that we really like to focus on at Le Cordon Bleu is what Chef just mentioned, mise en place, which translates to everything in its place. An extremely important part of being a successful chef or being successful in the kitchen at all is to be organized, to be able to look ahead and envision what's going to go into a dish, get it all together so that it's ready, so that you don't have to stop the cooking process to go run across the kitchen for something that you forgot.
It's working smarter, not harder, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I've got, while he's playing around with the rest of that, he's just really mixing things in a bowl. Don't worry about it.
Not hard cooking, that part.
But as we move forward, I'm going to make the vegetarian version of our carpaccio, which is with zucchini and squash. So you see here, I have a little bit of summer squash. I think it's nice and colorful, so I added it in there. And I have my zucchini, and all I did was really cut them very thinly. And you can do it in rounds. I chose to do it on a bias because I think it looks pretty that way. There's no other reason than that. And I'm going to add this all to a bowl. And in this bowl, I've got some tangerine juice for a fun piece of difference right here. You could use lemon juice if you wanted to. You could use grapefruit juice if you wanted to. We just happen to have that on hand, so I couldn't resist. You'll find a lot of times that we might change things up a little bit because we can't resist it. I've got some parsley here, but if you wanted to do something different and add thyme, or you wanted to add, some people really like tarragon or
fresh
rosemary.
Basil.
Yeah, fresh basil, lavender, what maybe. It's really up to you. And then I'm going to add a little bit of our olive oil.
Now, is that extra virgin olive oil?
This is extra virgin olive oil, and that's a great question. You know, this is one of the things where I love to use extra virgin olive oil because it has such a beautiful flavor to it. I generally don't cook with extra virgin olive oil, but in this case, this isn't something that's going to be cooked. The flavor is going to carry through, and so I'm happy to use it here. So I want to let this sit for just a moment so I can get these zucchini nice and pliable. They're fairly thinly sliced, so it's not going to take too long.
We just had a question, Chef. The difference between CEC or CMC?
So
could you talk to people a little bit about the ACF?
So the ACF is the American Culinary Federation, and a lot of our competencies are strongly aligned with that for the reasons that we have the same goal of teaching people how to cook and that professional development. So a CEC is a certified executive chef, and a CMC is a certified master chef. There are different levels of certification that you can achieve with the ACF, starting from certified culinarian, which is what people will achieve as they come out of culinary school, going into certified sous chef, certified chef de cuisine, certified executive chef. We both have that. In fact, many of our chef instructors here on campus are certified executive chef. We have one who's a personal certified executive chef because she does the whole, I mean, she's really into personal chefing. And certified master chef is the top level that you can achieve. But not very many people get that far. Few do. We have overlooking and overseeing our curriculum. We do have a certified master chef, Edward Leonard.
Absolutely. Additionally, if I can cut in, Chef, there's the same line of certification for pastry chefs, starting out at the entry level pastry chefs and working all the way up to certified master pastry chefs in the exact same parallel line of certifications through the ACF. And we have several, we have certified executive pastry chefs on staff as well, and throughout Le Cordon Bleu. Alignment with the ACF is very good for our schools. As Chef said, it aligns very closely with the curriculum that we're teaching. And we've both found that going through the process of taking these examinations, studying for them, sharpening our technique has really, really helped us improve as chefs.
Well, you know, as instructors and as teachers, we have to be lifelong learners. And more so than that, one of my favorite quotes in the culinary industry is from a chef called Fernand Point. Fernand Point is a chef. He was one of our forefathers, if you will, in the chef world, a French guy. And his only goal was to refine the art of cooking in the simplicity and beauty of the ingredients that he had. So he didn't try and overdo anything. And one of the things that he's quoted and famous for saying is, in this profession, more so than in any other, you are always going to be a student. And I take that very much to heart, because if you ever stop learning, then and especially in this craft, it's detrimental. There are so many different ways to skin a cat, and you'll see that we've done some things here today. If you go to Le Cordon Bleu, or if you have one of your chef instructors, they may do it slightly differently. And some people get a little bit flustered by it, but I think it's beautiful, because that way you learn several different ways to do one thing. Absolutely.
As Chef mentioned, the idea that we have at Le Cordon Bleu, and I feel like the best way to cook is to focus on the basic techniques that you use, and from there is infinite variation of things that you can do with those techniques. As we've tried to show you today, a simple theme with several different variations. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish the tartare dish, which, as you can see, the tuna has now all the different ingredients that I had there mixed together. So I'm going to go ahead and plate it here in the center. Now this could be served as an appetizer, depending on how large you make the portion, or as what we like to call an amuse-bouche, which is a simple 1 or 2 bite appetizer that's given away for free at the beginning of the meal. There's many different ways that you can serve this exact same idea. All right.
So one of my favorite things to do, really, is that tuna tartare right there, just because it's so pretty and so colorful. So what I have here is I'm moving into plating my zucchini carpaccio. And I've got a lavash here, which is a cracker. And really, you could use anything. It could be a piece of naan, which is a type of Indian flatbread, maybe some pita. Maybe you're going to use a crostini. Maybe you're not going to use anything at all. But I like to serve the carpaccio on something that you can pick up and eat it with. So this lavash we made in-house. We had one of our pastry chefs do it. As much as I love to cook, my pastry skills still need improvement on, so I'm going to start working on that next. And then I have here as well, on the side, I have a little bit of arugula, which is this green right here. And what I've used is some of the tangerine, and I added some of the lemon zest, some of the olive oil, some of the same herbs, some salt and pepper, and I'm just tossing it right here so that can create some bit of salad. So I'm going to start putting this on the plate. And
to finish up my plate at the same time, the tuna is coming together with a wonton for obviously the texture difference. There's a lot of different things that you have to think about when you're plating, and this is where a lot of students really gravitate towards this part of cooking. I know I do. I love it. This is where you see the different color contrasts, the shapes, the textures that are on the plate. And I'm going to have some chives that I cut added in there. Remember, chives are in the tuna tartare itself. So now I've got a little bit of height. I've got elegant garnish that goes exactly with what's already in the dish. And I have this beautiful little plate to serve it with. So everything is kind of working in alignment. And this is something that we like to spend some time with here at Le Cordon Bleu, is how to construct a dish. Sure, you've put all these beautiful flavors together. Whether it's a tartare or something off the grill, out of the oven, it doesn't matter. How do you put it on a plate that make people excited about taking a bite? We call it the wow factor.
Now, Chef,
the plates
in
are
beef
set
tartare,
down,
we often
exciting.
have an egg. So is that something that we could use here as well?
Yes, classical beef tartare is served with an egg yolk. That is absolutely something that you could use here. In fact, when Chef and I were talking about perhaps putting together a dish like this or doing beef tartare instead of carpaccio, we asked, hey, how about for something small like the tuna, how about a quail egg? How about a quail yolk? Taking that idea from a classical beef dish and translating it into a tuna dish. And yes, so to answer the question, you absolutely could use egg or egg yolk on that dish and have it work the exact same way.
Perfect. So how about dessert?
The last thing, dessert plate. So here are the pieces that we have to work with for this dish. Now remember our theme that we have going on here, which is crostini, carpaccio, bruschetta even, all of these things with a crisp, almost cracker layer underneath. And then the actual dish itself on top. So I've sliced the pears, and I've had one of our pastry chefs here put together some really beautiful tuiles. And again, as Chef mentioned, I am capable of making a tuile, but not quite this elegant. Now, one of the fun things about poached pears, and the reason I chose port wine, is we have this really beautiful contrast that you can see here from the finished pears, which is they've turned purple. And then on the inside of the pear, there's still that lovely pear color. So that's always a nice thing to think about. And when do you think about plating? You think about the finished dish at the beginning. I like to choose port because of the beautiful colors I get to play with at the end when I'm putting the dish together. Now additionally, I've infused some mascarpone cheese, which is a very creamy, rich cheese, but very neutral in flavor.
Could you use something like cream cheese?
You absolutely could. Or goat cheese.
Or goat cheese would
any of those kinds of things. Anything that you feel like would either go well with the pear or with the ingredients that you're putting into the poaching liquid. You could absolutely put those ingredients in there, mix and match as you go along, and create the dish that you really love.
Again, this is always about technique, and that's the one thing we really, really choose to focus on here at Le Cordon Bleu.
And so to add in this mascarpone cheese, I've put in basically the same ingredients that I put in the poaching liquid. This has lemon zest, orange zest, fresh mint. There's a little vanilla in here, a touch of sugar. All the things that are going to make this creamy part of it match perfectly with the flavors that are already in the pear. And so to touch it, just a small little bit onto the pear. And then we've got here for color, garnish, and flavor. Again, it's matching everything that we've built here, is some candied orange rind.
So chef, how did you candy the orange rind?
You candy orange rind the exact same way that you would candy ginger, which is to blanch it first in water to take away some of that really intense bitterness from the rind itself, and then slowly poach it, again, the poaching technique, poach it in what's called a simple syrup, which is 1 part granulated sugar and 1 part water. And that softens the rind, it takes the bitterness away, and then it infuses it with a certain amount of sweetness. And from there you can see it literally turns into candy. And you can eat that orange rind, get that intense orange flavor with intense sweetness, and then you get the color as well to make your dish really work.
Now, if I had used lemon, could I use lemon to or lemon zest to candy as well? Same method?
Absolutely, you'd use the exact same method. Now you can either take the rind off with a knife and julienne it very finely, or you can use different zesters and things like that to remove the rind. But it's those same basic techniques that we're talking about. Poaching, blanching, give you the result that you want. All right, so I'm going to put together one more of these. And so you can see at the end of all this, we've got some very different looking dishes here. Obviously, very different ingredients. We've got fish, we've got beef, we've got vegetarian.
We have a summer feast is what we have going on.
We've got
all these
desserts.
Different courses.
Absolutely. But what we have in common is there's classical technique in every single one of the dishes. There's a common theme as well of carpaccio or bruschetta. Now these dishes could be changed in size. They could be adjusted in size. So if you were having a party and you wanted to do plated food on a table, that hors d'oeuvres that people could pick up and eat, or something passed, or they could be enlarged into an appetizer sized dish as well. All of those different things can be adjusted to fit whatever it is that you want to work. But running through it all is the classical technique.
Well, that's
and the proper
always the
use
theme,
of those
right? We look at
ingredients.
technique, we look at ratios, we look at a way of simplifying cooking so that you can take it big or small, or you can really let your mind wander where it will.
Absolutely. And not only that, that is when cooking becomes the most enjoyable. When you can apply your own creativity, your own ideas to it. And the best way to do that is to have that solid foundation, that solid technical foundation, that solid understanding of how to cook. And from there, any ingredient that you run into, you can turn into a beautiful finished product that you're really excited about.
Great. I believe we have a question from earlier that we may have missed.
Blended oils.
Yes, you can absolutely use blended oils or infused oils instead of EVOO, which is extra virgin olive oil. Really, it's how you choose to play with those flavors. So, for example, I would say with the beef carpaccio, one oil that would be really nice would be a garlic oil, would be fun to play with. You can use some blended oils using chive oil, a basil oil to garnish maybe the zucchini, something like that. So it's a little bit more color, more pop. Lots of different things that you can do. The beautiful thing is, and I think the hardest jump for some of our students to make is, as many rules as there are, they're really meant to help you open up that world of cooking. And it can really let your mind wander and take it to where you want it to go.
Right. And really quickly, the difference between extra virgin olive oil and regular olive oil is simply when you put the olives into a press, the very first oil that comes out of that press is extra virgin. The greenest, the most olive flavored oil is extra virgin olive oil. The more you continue to press, the lighter that oil gets, and that is your regular, cheaper olive oils. Now, one of the things that you want to consider when choosing which to use, extra virgin olive oil is going to give you a strong olive flavor. Do you want that on your dish? Another thing, it has a lower smoke point. So if you put it in a hot pan, you're going to cook out all that olive flavor that's left in that extra virgin olive oil. So you would actually be better served using a neutral flavored oil or even a corn oil that doesn't have any flavor at all, because that flavor will get torched away in that hot saute pan.
Well, thank you, Chef.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I hope you guys can take some tips from what we've done today and play around a little bit, enjoy the summer feast, and enjoy the fresh air. Thank you from Seattle. We appreciate you seeing us.
Thank you very much.